Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
It's Paul Joseph Watson with a PrisonPlanet.tv special report earlier today on Infowars.com. We had a blockbuster story about how the CDC was secretly detaining and disappearing suspected illegal aliens with illnesses, potentially from West Africa. And we're going to talk to a Border Patrol veteran, 27-year veteran, Zach Taylor, on these bombshell revelations. 3 months ago, 4 months ago, you gave this interview regarding illegals being apprehended at the border with illnesses. Just elaborate on what you said in that interview about how authorities there at the border are dealing with these individuals.
Well, the first thing is that a large number of these aliens, if not exclusively, were not from Mexico. They were from Central America. And a percentage of them were unaccompanied minors. Those two things were unusual. And the numbers, it was like an invasion where the agents suspected they were catching, I heard anything from less than 10% of what they saw to as much as 20% of what they saw. But that doesn't take into account the aliens that slipped through that were not seen. So if they were catching about 20% maximum of what they saw, they might have been seeing 1 or 2% of what was actually coming through. What actually came in is unknown. However, what they were encountering and apprehending, some of these people had obvious illnesses, such as shivering type fever. They were nauseous or vomiting and or had diarrhea.
We've had reports of hundreds of Liberians crossing into the border, many that remain unapprehended. Do you think it's a concern that some of these surge aliens with these illnesses could be, in future, maybe potential Ebola victims that we're importing into the United States at risk to the population of America?
And it was very difficult to get any information about these people at that time. But it was at a time when the Ebola outbreak in those 3 West African countries was burgeoning, and these people either came through or were from West Africa and were seen in the Rio Grande Valley, and some of them were transported to Nogales. Well, those people were released into the population in America. A lot of these screening and releases were happening in like 5 to 6 days. The incubation period between the time a person contracts Ebola until they show symptoms is anywhere from 2 to 21 days. Well, if they traveled from Africa through Mexico to the United States in 5 days, they were held in detention 5 days. They were essentially halfway through the incubation period until they showed any type of symptoms of having the Ebola virus. That was a big concern to us, that they weren't held long enough to determine whether or not they were carrying the virus. And one of the reasons that I went on and did that video, that was 5 hours plus of video. What you saw was only clips out of it.
Okay, so some of these people that were detained with the illnesses, do you know of any information, towards the fact whether the people detaining them had any protection, whether that be hazmat suits or merely surgical masks? Were the people who detained these individuals protecting themselves against possible infection?
No, but we have, lacking empirical evidence, we know that at Lackland Air Force Base and at other locations, that the private security and the government was threatening the contract workers, the health workers, with criminal prosecution if they divulged any information about the types of illnesses that these aliens had that were being screened at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio.
This, of course, was back in July and August. Do you believe that this process in the aftermath of the first Ebola outbreak in the United States is still ongoing?
Well, why wouldn't it be?
So that's still ongoing at the border. People with illnesses, potentially from West Africa, being transported into the United States, and the government has a lockdown on the information pertaining to that. That's an amazing revelation there. Another comment that you made in the interview, which interested me, you said that the spread of Ebola in the West African cities back 3-4 months ago appeared to suggest that the origins of the virus may have been man-made, or that it may have been planted, in your words. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. And I had been watching that because this surge was underway, and I knew that illegal aliens are opportunists. And whenever you have a large group of people moving across the border, it encourages other people. It's kind of a stampede mentality people get, that, oh, they see a whole bunch of other people doing it, and they've always wanted to do it, so why don't they join in on the stampede? And West Africa is not that far from McAllen, Texas, by aircraft. And so in talking to people that were working these folks and seeing the ones that were showing up here, obviously they were from West Africa. And we hear that the Border Patrol, as early as this past week, or as late as this past week, has been catching people from Africa. Eritrea, I think, is the one that was mentioned today. But I'm more concerned about what's not being apprehended. For instance, the agents for the last 3 years have been telling us here in this part, Tucson sector, that they estimate they're catching less than 3% of what they know is crossing the border illegally. Well, if they're catching 1 or 2 or 3 people from West Africa, how many actually crossed?
That's amazing.
If they caught 3, and they're averaging for the last 3 years 3% of what crosses, what actually came across?
And
we don't know.
The CDC refuses to seal the border. They refuse to block the flights, despite all these concerns. What do you think about the sanity of that decision on behalf of the CDC to refuse to take action at the border or at blocking the flights coming in from West Africa?
Well, I think it's a political decision. Let me tell you why. Back on October the 2nd, there was a White House briefing. The DHS spokesperson's name, I believe, was Lisa Monaco. And Sylvia Burwell, who's the current Secretary of Health and Human Services, were, along with USAID Director Dr. Rod Shaw. And they were talking about it wasn't worth adversely affecting the economy of these West African nations by quarantining the borders of those countries. Well, exactly who are they representing? Are they representing the people of West Africa and their economy, or are they out to protect the people of the United States? When you have the spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security, Dr. Tony Fauci from the National Institute of Health, Sylvia Burwell from Health and Human Services saying, no, we're not going to do everything to protect the American people at the risk of the economy of 3 third-world African nations, that, sir, is an invitation for people to continue to come here illegally.
And then we've got another issue which I wanted to get to, which is ISIS. We've got law enforcement sources down on the border saying that ISIS militants are in Mexico planning cross-border attacks. Yet again, the DHS says basically there's no threat whatsoever. They're not going to do anything about it. Do you believe that the ISIS threat is genuine coming from the border, and what should we do about it?
I believe Duncan Hunter went public yesterday or day before saying that he had information that has yet to be refuted that Border Patrol caught 10 ISIS fighters crossing the border since the 29th of last month.
So you think that is a very real threat that's not being addressed, that ISIS militants are in place, as we got from the law enforcement sources?
Look. If we're only catching 3% of what's coming across, why wouldn't they try it?
Exactly. Okay, that's going to wrap it up. Amazing revelations there. We'll be sure to have more articles going up on Infowars.com about these revelations of Zach Taylor of the National Association of Border Patrol Officers. Thanks for joining us today, Zach Taylor.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. And if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to prisonplanet.tv, live streaming of The Alex Jones Show, special reports, videos, a plethora of multimedia content, and it supports the operation here at Infowars. Subscribe today at prisonplanet.tv. That's going to wrap it up today. I'm Paul Joseph Watson. We'll see you again next time.
In the past decade, we have witnessed unparalleled scientific discoveries in the area of health. But no one has put together a formula that focuses directly on brain health, nerve growth factors, and optimizing your cellular energy at the same time. DNA Force is one of the most expensive formulas to produce. Some of the ingredients in DNA Force are $12,000 a kilogram. We are using the coveted, patented, only American source of PQQ, CoQ10, and more. You want the best that's out there at the lowest price anywhere? Well, we're bringing you a total win-win. The ultimate value, cutting-edge, trailblazing game changer that also supports the InfoWar. We have produced a limited run of DNA Force, and it will take up to 12 weeks to produce more once we sell out. Secure your DNA Force today at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139. DNA Force from InfoWars Life.